We take for granted, most of us, or all of us some of the time, that we're going to function all right. Even I do. I get up in the morning and I step out of bed. I always tell you more than you need to know, but that's okay. And by practice, I would kneel by the side of my bed and say, a morning offering, rest of the day for God. Then I forget about it after a while, but anyhow, that's life. And I notice that anymore I'm reaching out for the pillow. We take things for granted, don't we? I get up and I feel good, just like you know, and you start moving around. And we take it for granted. At this very moment, every one of us takes some things for granted because we haven't been thinking about the details that you're not thinking about whether you're breathing or not. Take it for granted. Every now and then you have to stop and say, is this really working this way? Our eyesight, we take for granted. Oh, you get a little older and you need some assistance. And they have these things called glasses, you know. I take it off and I can see a lot of figures out there. To recognize your face, I have to put them on. We take for granted life in general. We go to bed at night and we say, thank you for a good day, Lord, well spent. Oh, I muffed it up a little bit here and there, but, you know, you forget about it and I will too. You walk, you take it for granted. So do I, even though with difficulty sometimes. But in the mornings, it's great. By half the day, it doesn't work so well. A person who is deaf. Now, deaf means the hearing is not there at all. It's not impaired, it is not there. Mine is a little impaired. I need some assistance with my eyes and I need some assistance with my ears. I'm not afraid to say that. God has been good and continues to be good. Think about this miracle that is recorded in the scriptures today. First of all, to understand that by the seashore was always a trade atmosphere. Even now it is. All our big cities are by the water. Most of them. Used to be the only ones before, but now we have big cities even in the central part of the country. But think about the trade places. They're all by the water. Charleston is becoming, in a good sense, notorious. That means of notoriety. Famous, because the harbor is able to accommodate, and did, and will continue to, I'm sure, with constant work being done, some of the biggest freight liners on the ocean. If I remember correctly, not too long ago, the largest freight liner was in the port of Charleston. I can't even imagine this. But then again, my mind is so simple, you know. 20,000 containers. 20,000 containers. And everything works like clockwork. There's no time to waste. All those cranes are busy all the time. Loading and unloading happens within 24 hours maybe, and the ship is out to sea again. Jesus came to the area called the Decapolis. Two Greek words, Deca and Polis. The 10 little cities, as they would say. That whole area was the Decapolis. And naturally, it was a trade area, and not too many people, well, the larger number would have been non-Jewish. The Gentile world. And in the Gentile world, this man had become famous for the miracles that he had worked. Miracles, something that only a power other than human power can do. Let's get that clear. We think we work miracles, we don't. We work with physical realities. Jesus, the only physical reality, was the one who received the miracle. The blind, the deaf, the lame, the dead, recipients of the power of God. And people brought to him in the area of the Decapolis. The Jewish people said, oh, this is, yeah, we can understand this, he's a Jew. Remember that old story about how we claim our inheritance, so to speak? We'll do this fast, okay? It changes its words every now and then, but the story remains very true. So, Paddy the Irishman was telling his Jewish friend, the rabbi, Ibrahim really, my son is going to become a priest. And Ibrahim said, a priest? Paddy was not too impressed, and he said, you know what? If my son is a good priest, they may elevate him and give him another position and make him a Monsignor. And Paddy was getting all excited about this, and Abraham said, so, Monsignor, so what's the big deal? But you don't understand really, because, he could someday be a bishop, and then if he does very well, he may become an archbishop. That means he's administratively responsible for a group of bishops, administratively. And Ibrahim said, well, there's no big deal about this, Ibrahim, they may make him a cardinal someday. And the cardinal is a person who has such high authority that when they gather together, they can elect the Pope. And my son may become the Pope. And he was so excited at the prospect of his son being the Pope. And Ibrahim said, so, the Pope, so what? No big deal. By this time, Paddy had lost every other argument that he had, and he looked at Abraham and he said, you really don't understand this. What do you think? My son is Jesus Christ? And Abraham said, no, that's one of our boys. The Jews claimed Jesus as a good Jew. They disagreed with his manner of life. But the things he did were astonishing. You couldn't help it but say, wow. They brought to him a deaf man who also had a speech impediment and begged him to lay his hand on him. Now Jesus takes him off to the side and he does something that our American hygiene will not permit. But remember, this is the Son of God doing things. And people were beginning to realize that this man is just no ordinary person. He is somewhat a reflection of the divine. Not that he is divine, but he reflects in many ways the divine. The realization that this is God was something that was slow to get a hold of the hearts and the minds of people. And he put his finger into the man's ears. Now don't feel too bad about this. And spitting, he touched his tongue. In some ways, this is God being part of human nature, involving himself in everything. And spitting touched his tongue. And he looked up to heaven and groaned, and he said to him in the original language that Jesus spoke, Aramaic. It's not a spoken language now. In linguistics, it's called a dead language. So is Latin a dead language, gave rise to many other languages, but it's not a spoken language, it's a dead language. Dead and live in linguistics means used and not used. There was a time when it was used. And he said in Aramaic, Ephata. The meaning is, be opened. Be opened. Be opened. And immediately the man's ears were opened, and his speech impediment was removed. And he spoke plainly. I know what that second part means. Now I'm beginning to realize what the first part means. Be opened. I mentioned this before. The power of God is wonderful. As a kid, I had a speech impediment. I mentioned this to you. I couldn't understand myself, and others couldn't understand me. And fortunately, good fortune, as they say, my family was able to send me to speech school to learn how to speak. I couldn't understand myself. I'm so grateful for going to speech school, because now that I speak, you cannot shut me up. But anyway, I know what that means, not to be able to speak. The man's ears were opened, his speech impediment was removed, and he spoke plainly. And then Jesus did what he did many times. He says, now listen, don't tell anyone about this. It wasn't to keep it a secret so much, but it was, people will realize on their own that the power of God is at work in them. And the more he said, don't tell anyone, the more they started talking about it. Now listen. They were exceedingly astonished. And they exclaimed, he has done all things well. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The power of God in our midst. Many times we are astonished by things that are done by humans. Talking to a friend last night here in Charleston, he said, you better get those knees attended to. You'd be amazed at the difference your life will have. And I believe that, I do. But it's a choice either between having a vacation or being in a hospital. When I come back, I should get it attended to. Because we know that health can be restored. But what if they say it cannot be restored? There's nothing more I can do. This man did all things well. He made the deaf hear and the mute speak. No one could do that. He did. Something about this guy. Something about this guy. The realization that the Son of God lived in our midst. Closing the book doesn't mean it's over. A bigger book comes out, and then it continues for another 45 minutes. The realization that the Son of God is in our midst makes all things happen. The prophet Isaiah, hundreds of years before Jesus, here is your God. He comes with vindication, with strength, with power, with divine recompense. He comes to save you. And listen what Isaiah says. Hundreds of years before Jesus. The eyes of the blind will be opened. The ears of the deaf will be cleared. The lame will leap like a stag. And then the tongue of the mute will sing. And furthermore, streams will burst forth in the desert. Streams. The desert, devoid of water. This morning, the temperature in Dubai was 108 degrees. I read the sacred scriptures again, and I thought, 108 degrees, glad I'm only passing through the place. Dubai is in the desert. The burning sands will become pools, and the thirsty ground springs of water. When? When the Savior comes. Hundreds of years later, he opens the ears of the deaf and loosens the tongue of the dumb. And they hear clearly and speak clearly. My brothers and sisters, we don't always have to look to the past and say, well, all these nice things happened in the past. They happen today. There are little miracles that happen in your life and in my life. We just have to stop and realize that this is the power of God. When we say things like, it's inexplainable, that means you have no explanation for it whatsoever. That's the power of God. That's what you want to say. Say the power of God. Say the power of the divine. Say it. Because anything that's human is generally explained. The most complicated surgeries of the world. The most common now, the style, during the surgery, they say, I come from partly a medical family, so it was said before too. The doctor keeps talking, and there's a recording going on of everything that's happening, so that it's totally the skills of the practitioner. But when it's more than the skills of the practitioner, it's the power of God. And we may want to consider ourselves living in a Christian country and a Christian city and whatever else, holy city. But we are like the Decapolis in many ways. Unless we see and touch and feel and taste, we sometimes do not realize the power of God. A little food for thought in your quiet moments. Find a few quiet moments during the day. They're always healthy for the mind and the heart, for what you see and for what you don't see, for your general life and for your life of faith. And you know what? And mine too. In the name of the Father,